February 9, 1950. Wheeling, West Virginia. A man stands before a crowd, waving a piece of paper like a holy relic. He claims it contains 205 names of traitors within the government. This man is Joseph McCarthy, a junior senator, a political nobody, but in 30 seconds, he would ignite a fire that would burn the American psyche for a decade. But here is the secret history. The list was a lie. The paper was empty. Yet, the nation didn't just believe him. They demanded the blood he promised. Why? Because McCarthy didn't invent a conspiracy. He discovered a biological vulnerability in the human brain. He discovered fear contagion. Welcome to Psyche of Power. Today, we dissect the anatomy of a witch hunt. We are going deep into the hardcore history and the darker corners of human nature. To understand McCarthy, you have to understand the psychology of the void. Post-WRI America was a vacuum of existential dread. The bomb was real. The enemy was invisible. Humans hate ambiguity more than they fear death. We are wired to seek certainty. McCarthy offered the most intoxicating form of certainty, a villain. McCarthy wasn't a master strategist. He was a Machiavellian personality who understood that truth is secondary to the speed of the lie. In psychology, this is called the illusory truth effect. Repeat a lie often enough, with enough conviction, and it becomes the floor the public walks on. But how did one man paralyze the smartest minds in the world? Let's look at the first act, the architecture of paranoia. Every witch hunt starts with the othering of the self. McCarthy told Americans that the enemy wasn't just over there. It was sitting next to you at the dinner table. He utilized what anthropologists call the scapegoat mechanism. This brings us to our first deep dive, René Girard's Mimetic Theory. Girard argued that human desire isn't individual. It's mimetic. We want what others want. When society becomes too similar, internal tensions rise. America in the 50s was a period of extreme conformity. Everyone had the same car, the same house, the same dream. This sameness created a hidden, boiling pressure. To prevent the group from tearing itself apart, it finds a scapegoat. Someone who is blamed for all the internal rot. The group unites, not by love, but by a shared hatred. McCarthy provided the target. He didn't need proof. He needed a sacrificial lamb. Cognitive reversal number 1. McCarthyism wasn't a breakdown of order. It was a desperate attempt to create order through ritualistic exclusion. Let's talk about the spiral of silence. This theory, developed by Elizabeth Noel Newman, explains why the majority stayed quiet while their friends were ruined. People have a quasi-statistical sense. We constantly monitor the environment to see which opinions are safe. If we feel our view is in the minority, we fall silent to avoid social death. Social death, to the primitive brain, is the same as physical death. McCarthy didn't need to arrest everyone. He just needed to make the cost of speaking too high. He was a master of the gish gallop, drowning his opponents in a rapid-fire succession of half-truths and fabrications so they couldn't possibly refute them all. By the time you disproved one lie, he had told 10 more. This isn't debate. It's psychological exhaustion. The infamous question, are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? This is the double bind of the predator. If you say yes, you are destroyed. If you say no, you are called a liar. If you refuse to answer, you are a Fifth Amendment communist. This is the trapped ratio. It's designed to break the ego. It's not about finding the truth. It's about forcing a confession. Why did the public love the drama? Because of Schadenfreude's survival. In a culture of fear, watching someone else get burned makes you feel safe. As long as they are looking at him, they aren't looking at me. This is the core of the bystander's betrayal. Now, let's enter Act 2, the infrastructure of betrayal. Why did friends turn on friends? Why did the intellectuals crumble? Cognitive reversal. Number 2, intelligence is not a shield against paranoia. In fact, the highly intelligent are often better at rationalizing their own cowardice. This is the sophisticate's trap. An intelligent person can construct a complex logical framework to justify why they shouldn't speak up. They tell themselves, "It's for the greater good," or "I must protect my institution," but in reality, they are just victims of the Abilene paradox. The Abilene paradox. A group of people collectively decide on a course of action that is counter to the preferences of many or all of the individuals in the group. Everyone thinks everyone else wants to hunt witches, so they go along with it to fit in, even though, privately, everyone thinks it's insane. McCarthy was the catalyst of the unreal. He turned a room full of private doubts into a public consensus of terror. Then came the professional informant, a new class of person created by the state, people like Harvey Matusal, who later admitted he made it all up. Why did they lie? For the same reason people join cults: status-seeking and narcissistic supply. These were men who were nobodies. Suddenly, the FBI is calling. The Senate is listening. They felt like gods. The lie gave them life. This is the dark triad in action: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. McCarthyism was their playground. The psychological cost. The death of social capital. When you can't trust your neighbor, the glue of society dissolves. In psychology, this is atomization. A lonely, atomized population is much easier to control than a unified one. McCarthy turned the United States into a panopticon, a prison where you never know if you're being watched, so you police yourself. The panopticon effect is the ultimate goal of fear contagion. The dictator doesn't need to be everywhere if the fear is inside your head. But every infection has a peak, and every fever must break. Let's look at the psychology of the collapse. It happened in 1954, the Army-McCarthy hearings. The first time the virus was broadcast live to millions for weeks. On TV, McCarthy's alpha predator persona didn't look strong anymore. It looked uncanny. In the uncanny valley of psychology, when something looks human but acts like a monster, we feel deep, instinctive disgust. McCarthy was a creature of the radio and the newspaper. Under the unforgiving glare of the television lights, he looked like a bully. He looked pathetic. Enter Joseph Welch, the lawyer for the Army. He played the empath to McCarthy's dark triad. Have you no sense of decency? Sir, at long last, have you left no sense of decency? This wasn't a legal argument. It was a moral pattern interrupt. For 4 years, the nation had been in a trance state. Welch's question acted as a hypnotic break. He appealed to a part of the psyche that McCarthy had repressed: empathy. Almost overnight, the contagion lost its host. The spiral of silence reversed. Suddenly, it was fashionable to hate McCarthy. This is social shunning. McCarthy went from the most feared man in Washington to a ghost. He died 3 years later, an alcoholic, broken and forgotten. But did the virus die with him? This is the third and final cognitive reversal. Cognitive reversal number 3. McCarthyism isn't a historical era. It's a permanent psychological archetype. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, when a society refuses to acknowledge its own darkness. It projects that darkness onto others. Today, we have the digital panopticon. The speed of the lie is now the speed of light. We still use the double bind. We still use the spiral of silence. We just changed the names of the isms. Let's look at one final experiment. The third wave. In 1967, a high school teacher in California created a movement to show how easily fascism could return. In just 5 days, the students began spying on each other, ostracizing their friends, and demanding absolute loyalty to the wave. They weren't evil. They were just caught in the social validation loop. The brain rewards us with dopamine when we belong to a powerful group. Belonging is a more powerful drug than truth. McCarthy knew this instinctively. Fear contagion works because it hijacks the amygdala, the primitive part of our brain that handles survival. When the amygdala is active, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic and nuance, shuts down. You cannot argue a person out of a state of fear using logic. You can only replace the fear with a more powerful emotion. This is why Welch's decency worked. It wasn't logic. It was a higher effective appeal. McCarthyism is the pathology of the weak. It is what happens when a nation loses its psychological immunity. How do we build immunity today? The first step is cognitive reframing. Stop asking, "Is this person a traitor?" and start asking, "Who benefits from my fear?" Fear is a commodity. It's the most profitable product in human history. McCarthy was the first engagement farmer. He didn't want a better country. He wanted a bigger audience. The hardcore history lesson here isn't about communism. It's about the fragility of the rational. We like to think we are more evolved than the people of 1950. We aren't. Our hardware is 50,000 years old. We are still the same tribe seeking scapegoat-burning primates. We just have better tools for the fire. The ghost of McCarthy doesn't haunt Washington. It haunts the collective unconscious. Every time you join a digital pile on without facts, every time you stay silent to protect your status, the virus finds a new host. The price of power is often the psyche of the people, and as we've seen, that price is one many are still willing to pay. Don't be afraid of the invisible enemy. Be afraid of the man who promises to protect you from it. This has been Psyche of Power. If you want to understand the mechanisms of control, you have to look into the mirror. Subscribe if you're brave enough to see the world for what it really is. Until next time, stay awake.